So, Padawan, I see you've come back for a visit.
Yes, Master. I've come to see who really is the Master.
Before we get into this epic fight, I think there's a few things that we can maybe learn from this conflict.
Notice about the lines, what do you?
Well, off the top of my head, it would appear they are angled the same.
True, that is. This is because they have the same slope. If two linear equations have the same slope, parallel they must be.
Whoa, hold on. I think there's one more topic that Yoda forgot to mention. So let's go back and talk about that.
How about these lines? What else?
Oh, I know. They form 90-degree angles.
Correct. This is because the slopes are opposite reciprocals. If two linear equations have slopes with opposite signs and flipped fractions, perpendicular they must be.
Sometimes you're going to be asked to write an equation of a line, and you're going to be given a point as well. So in this case, I want to write the equation of a line that's parallel to this line, but passes through the point -4, 6. Okay, so remember what we learned about parallel lines. They have the same exactly slope. So we know that m is going to equal 1/2 because that's the slope of this line in slope-intercept form. And now I've got to pass through -4, 6. So I don't know what my y-intercept is. So I've got to figure out the y-intercept. So I'm going to plug into y equals mx plus b. And I know that y is 6 equals 1/2 times -4 because that's the x plus b. Now, if you didn't want to do it this way, you could also use point-slope form, and you could figure it out that way as well. Okay? So in this case, 6 equals 1/2 times -4 is -2 plus b. I add 2 to both sides, and so b equals 8. So that I know that my slope is going to be 1/2, and my y-intercept is going to be 8. So that means the equation of the line that I'm going to write is going to be y equals 1/2 x plus 8. You have to be careful because sometimes it might ask you for it in a different form. This one we did in slope-intercept form, but it might ask you for the equation of the line in standard form, or it could ask you for the equation of the line in point-slope form. So just be ready for each one of those different situations. Now, if you didn't want to do it this way, you could also use point-slope form, and you could figure it out that way as well.
So, like Master Cohen's just said, you can also do this problem using point-slope form, which might make more sense if that's the end goal of the problem, if that's the form that it wants it to be in. So, let's try this again using the same principles. So, for point-slope form, we need a point and a slope, right? Well, we've got the point that we're trying to use, and we know the slope. From y equals mx plus b form, we know that the slope is 1/2. Okay, that doesn't change. But now we want to use point-slope form, which, if you remember, was y minus y1 equals m times the quantity of x minus x1. All right, so now all we have to do is plug those two things in. So we've got y minus y1, which is 6, so minus 6, equals m, which is the slope 1/2, times the quantity of x minus x1, which is a -4, minus a negative makes this a plus 4. And there you have it, the equation that is parallel to this line going through that point in point-slope form. So now let's look at an example where you're asked to write an equation of the line perpendicular to the equation given and that goes through this point. So it's going to start out the same way. You're going to want to identify the slope because you're going to need that to write any sort of equation. So, like we talked about earlier in the video, for perpendicular lines, the slope is the opposite reciprocal. Okay? So our current slope, I'm going to call that m1, okay, of the original, right, is -1/4. we got that from the slope-intercept form of this equation, right? And if it was in point-slope form, we'd know to look outside the parentheses where the x values are, right? But m1 is negative 1/4. So I like to do the reciprocal first and then worry about the opposite dealio, all right? So m2 is what I'm going to call the next one, would first be the reciprocal, which is 4 over 1, okay? And then you have to decide whether it's going to be positive or negative. Since the original was a negative 1/4, then the opposite is going to make it a positive, whatever we get here. So we're flipping the fraction, and we're making it opposite, which in this case makes it positive, okay? Now, we know 4 over 1 reduces to just 4, okay? So don't let that trip you up. So in this case, our new slope is going to be 4. We're going to use that, and we have our point -3, -4. Now, obviously, we could, from here, use these two things to write an equation in point-slope form. But if it asks you to find the equation in standard form, I highly recommend starting with slope-intercept form. That was a lot of words, but let's see what I'm talking about here. So let's say that the question asked for this in standard form. Okay, so since it asked for that, we need to first write an equation in slope-intercept form. So we've got slope. We need to figure out what our intercept is based on this equation. So we're going to use Master Cohen's method first. All right? So we start out with y equals mx plus b, right? And then we plug in the things that we know to figure out what we don't know, which is the y-intercept. So our y value is -4, right? Equals m, which we're going to use 4, times x, which is -3, and then plus b, since that's our unknown, right? So we got -4 equals 4 times -3 is -12 plus b, and then we would add 12 to both sides to get rid of the -12 over here. -4 plus 12 is going to give us a +8, and these cancel out to give you b. So now we have a slope, 4. I need to use this one. And then we have our y-intercept, 8. Now we can write our equation, which is going to be y equals 4x plus 8. But hold on. This is in slope-intercept form. It is asked for it in standard form. So let's convert that now to standard form. Okay, so we had y equals 4x plus 8. Now let's change that to standard form. And remember, for standard form, we need the x and y's on the same side, and we don't want fractions, and we don't want the first number to be negative. Okay, so since this 4x is already positive, I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to move this y to this side. I'm going to move the 8 to this side. Okay, so that makes this a -8, right? Because it was originally positive, equals 4x. And then this was a positive y, so when it moves over, it becomes -y. Okay? And then, just so that it looks exactly like standard form, I'm just going to flip the sides of this. So we've got positive 4x minus y equals -8. That would be the final answer for the equation of the line that is perpendicular to our original equation through the point -3, -4. Now that I've defeated my master, I have a challenge for you to see if you're worthy of the dark side. Here's an equation. Here's a point. Find an equation that is parallel to it in point-slope form and perpendicular to it in standard form. One other thing. This lightsaber It has two ends, this line and this line. Let me ask you something. Are these two lines parallel? If you're of the light side, the answer is no. If you're of the dark side, the answer is yes. You must decide and tell me at Math Workshop.
Thanks for watching.